Ever stop and think about how we actually learned to talk to computers? I mean, way before mice, way before touchscreens, it was all just text. So today, we're going to dive into the secret history of that little blinking cursor, the story of the command line interface. I love this quote. It comes from the old school world of Unix hackers, and it just perfectly nails our theme. GUIs, graphical user interfaces, they're great. They make the easy stuff, well, easy. Clicking on icons, dragging windows, all that. But the CLI, the command line interface, that's where the really hard things become possible. It unlocks a level of power that's just on a whole other level.
And you know what? It all boils down to this, right here. Behind every slick app, every beautiful interface on your phone or your laptop, this fundamental idea is still lurking underneath. It's a simple, direct conversation with the machine. And it all gets kicked off by this little blinking cursor, just waiting for your command.
Okay, so to really get why the command line was such a huge deal, we have to rewind the clock. I mean, way back to a time when having a real-time conversation with a computer was basically science fiction. See, back in the 50s and early 60s, you didn't really use a computer. That's not how it worked. You'd submit a job to it. I'm talking a literal stack of punched cards that you'd hand over to an operator, and then you'd wait. For hours, sometimes for days. All for a piece of printout. It was totally a one-way street. The big revolution, the game changer, was something called time sharing. And this is when everything shifted. Suddenly, you could have multiple people connecting to one giant mainframe with these things called teletypes. And for the very first time, computing stopped being about just submitting a job and became an actual conversation.
Well, any good conversation needs a translator, right? Something to sit in the middle, and that's exactly what the shell is. The term came from a computer scientist named Louis Pazin, and it's just a brilliant concept. Think of it like a protective bubble, a shell, around the super complex, kind of fragile core of the operating system. It lets you, the user, interact with it without any risk of, breaking the whole thing. You type a command, and the shell makes it happen.
So this basic idea of a command line, it really came into its own in the 1970s. This is when it evolved into something incredibly powerful and honestly kind of elegant. And that was all thanks to an operating system called Unix. You see, Unix didn't just use a command line. You could say it perfected it.
The people who created Unix had this philosophy that was so simple but totally profound. Their whole idea was this. Let's build a bunch of small, simple programs. Each program does just one thing, but it does that one thing perfectly. Now, the real genius, the magic, wasn't in the individual tools themselves. It was in how you could combine them, chain them together, to perform these incredibly complex tasks. But how do they do it?
Right. That's the key question. If you have one little program that lists all your files and another little program that's really good at counting lines of text, how do you make them work together to, say, count how many files you have?
The answer was this. A simple vertical line, the pipe. And I am not exaggerating when I say this is one of the most powerful, most elegant ideas in the entire history of computing. All it does is take the output from the command on its left, and it pipes it, it feeds it, directly into the input of the command on its right. Let me show you what I mean. Let's see it in action.
Okay, first up, we have a really simple command, cat. All it does is print the contents of a file. So here, we're telling it to print our computer's entire dictionary, and we are talking about a massive list of words.
Next, here's another simple tool called tail. And with that little -n1 argument, it takes whatever list you give it and shows you only the very last item on that list. Simple as that.
And here it is. This is where the magic happens. We connect those two simple commands with that pipe, and we've created a brand new tool right here, on the fly. We're telling the computer, show me all the words in the dictionary, but pipe that massive list into the tail command, which then shows me only the last one. And boom, we get Zyzigetten. We didn't write any new code. It's just pure composable power.
The command line was definitely the language of power users, but then the 1980s came along and a completely different way of talking to computers started to take over. And this new way, well, it appealed to everyone.
So on one side, you had MS-DOS, the pure command line operating system that brought computing to millions of desks. But on the other side, you had the Apple Macintosh, and it introduced the graphical user interface with its desktop, icons, and mouse to the mainstream. The age of pointing and clicking had officially begun.
And really, it all comes down to trade-offs. The GUI is fantastic. It's intuitive, it's easy to learn,
But it's slower for complex tasks, and it's very hard to automate. The CLI, on the other hand, has a really steep learning curve, no doubt. But for an expert, it is incredibly fast, it's lightweight, and it's built from the ground up for automation. So yeah, the GUI won the battle for the desktop, but the CLI became the essential tool for professionals.
But here's the thing. The command line didn't die. Far from it. While the rest of the world was busy clicking on icons, the CLI became the invisible engine that powers the entire modern internet and software development world.
I mean, just look at this list of tools. From Git for managing code, to Docker and Kubernetes for running modern applications, to the tools that manage the cloud infrastructure for companies like Amazon and Google. They're all command line first. You simply can't be a modern developer or a systems administrator without it. It's non-negotiable.
So that brings up the big question, right? In an age of beautiful graphical interfaces, why has this seemingly ancient way of interacting with computers not just survived, but actually thrived?
Well, it's because its core advantages are just timeless. It's all about speed for experts, the raw, unfiltered power to control everything, and the unmatched ability to automate any task you can think of. I mean, when you're managing 1 million servers in the cloud, you're not using a mouse, you're using a script. And that core principle of composability, of building powerful tools from simple parts, is more relevant today than ever before.
This really says it all. The command line is the universal language that lets developers and servers and automated systems all speak to each other clearly and efficiently. It truly is the common tongue of technology.
Which brings us to a final, really fascinating question. For decades, we have had to learn the computer's strict textual language. But now, as AI gets more and more conversational, will the command line as we know it just fade away? Or will it evolve once again, becoming an even more powerful way for us to express our intent to the machines we built? The prompt is blinking.